Ethan booked the cabin because it looked unreal. Tall pine trees. A quiet lake nearby.
No neighbors.
No phone signal. Just a clean wooden cabin sitting alone in the woods, advertised as the perfect escape from city noise. Laura loved it immediately. After months of deadlines, traffic, and constant screens, silence felt like luxury. The owner was already waiting when they arrived. An older man with tired eyes and a polite smile. He handed over the keys, showed them the fireplace, the generator, the water pump. Everything felt normal, almost rehearsed. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. "Best to stay inside after dark," he said casually. "Animals get curious." Ethan laughed and promised they would. The owner nodded once and drove away, disappearing down the narrow, dirt road. Inside, the cabin was spotless. Too spotless. Laura noticed there were no personal items. No books. No photos. Just furniture and blank walls, like a place meant to be temporary. They unpacked, lit the fireplace, poured drinks, and enjoyed the quiet. The woods outside were still, unnaturally still. As night settled, Laura felt uneasy. She couldn't explain it. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, like pressure. When she stepped near the door, she noticed long scratches carved into the wood, half hidden beneath a fresh coat of varnish. Old marks. Deep ones. Ethan brushed it off. "Probably bears," he said, though his voice wasn't fully convinced. Later, as the fire crackled low, Laura thought she heard something outside. Not footsteps. Breathing. Slow and patient. She stared at the window, but only darkness stared back. Then the feeling hit her. The cabin didn't feel like shelter. It felt like bait. When she turned toward Ethan to say something, the lights flickered once, just for a second. Long enough to make her heart jump. Long enough to make the silence feel alive. Somewhere deep in the woods, something shifted. And whatever it was, it knew they were there. The knocking started at exactly 2:17 a.m. It wasn't loud at first. Just 3 slow thuds against the cabin door, heavy enough to shake the frame. Ethan jolted awake, heart racing. Laura sat up instantly, already wide-eyed, as if she'd been waiting for it. They held their breath and listened. Nothing. No footsteps moving away.
No voices.
Just the fire popping softly in the fireplace and the deep, endless quiet of the woods. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and told Laura to stay put. He tried to sound calm, but his hands trembled as he reached for the door. Outside, the night air was freezing. The flashlight beam cut through fog drifting low between the trees. The porch was empty. No animals. No people. But when Ethan looked down, his stomach tightened. Footprints. Large, muddy prints led straight up to the door. They were deep, deliberate. And instead of leading away, they turned and disappeared into the woods, swallowed by darkness. When he stepped back inside, Laura was pale. She asked if he heard the whispering too. "What whispering?" Ethan asked. She said it sounded like someone standing right outside the walls, murmuring softly. At first she thought it was the wind. Then she realized it wasn't random. The sound kept repeating the same word. Her name. They tried using their phones. Both screens lit up briefly, then shut off.
Dead.
Even though they'd charged them earlier, the generator hummed strangely, like it was struggling to stay alive. Ethan checked the windows again. Every tree looked the same. Too close. As if the forest had moved in while they slept. Back in bed, neither of them slept. The silence kept breaking in small ways. A faint tap on the window. A soft scrape along the outer wall. Breathing that didn't belong to either of them. At 3:04 a.m., the knocking returned. This time it came from the back of the cabin.
Slower.
Closer. Laura pressed her hands over her ears, shaking. Ethan stared at the door, every instinct screaming at him not to open it. Whatever was outside wasn't trying to break in. It was waiting, and it knew exactly how long humans could stay afraid before making a mistake. Morning light should have brought relief, but it didn't. The woods looked darker in daylight, dense and watchful. A thin mist clung to the trees, and the air felt heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. Ethan stepped outside to check the car while Laura stayed near the door, scanning the tree line. The engine wouldn't turn over.
No clicks. No struggle.
Just silence. When Ethan came back inside, Laura was standing in the middle of the cabin, staring at the floor. A folded piece of paper lay near her feet. She swore it hadn't been there before. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges. Written in shaky handwriting were 3 rules. Do not open the back door after dark. Do not answer knocking. Do not follow voices into the woods. At the bottom was a date from over 20 years ago. Ethan laughed nervously, calling it a bad joke, maybe something the owner left behind to scare guests. But Laura felt cold reading it. The whispers she'd heard last night hadn't sounded like strangers. They sounded like her. Testing it, Laura stood perfectly still and whispered Ethan's name. A second later, the same whisper echoed back from somewhere deep in the forest.
Clear. Perfect. Wrong. Panic settled in.
They packed quickly and tried to leave on foot, but the dirt road they'd driven in on seemed longer than before. The trees bent inward, closing the space. Every turn looked unfamiliar. After 10 minutes of walking, the cabin appeared again ahead of them, exactly where they'd started. Back inside, the air felt tighter. The walls creaked softly, as if the cabin were breathing. Laura noticed something else now. There were scratches on the inside of the back door, deep gouges like someone had tried desperately to get out.
Not in.
Ethan read the rules again, slower this time. They hadn't been written to protect guests. They were written by someone who learned them too late. And as the sun dipped lower behind the trees, Laura realized something terrifying. Night was coming back. And this time, the cabin already knew their voices. They searched the cabin because staying still felt worse. Every drawer was empty. Every cupboard bare. No food left behind.
No forgotten clothes.
It was as if no one had ever truly lived there. Ethan ran his hand along the walls, knocking lightly, until one section sounded hollow. Behind a loose wooden panel, they found a narrow space stuffed with old photographs and folded newspaper clippings. The photos showed couples standing in front of the same cabin. Different faces. Different years. Same smiles. Same trees behind them. Each photo had one person scratched out, the marks violent and deep, tearing through the paper. Laura's chest tightened as she flipped through them. The clothes changed with time. Hairstyles shifted. The cabin never did. The newspaper clippings were worse. Headlines spoke about hikers and travelers who vanished near the forest. Always pairs. Always only one body found, if any at all. The location was never officially listed, just described as a wooded area off a rural road. Then Laura froze. One photograph sat at the bottom of the pile. The paper was newer. Her face stared back at her, smiling in front of the cabin. The date written on the back was decades old. That's not possible, Ethan said, but his voice cracked. He grabbed another photo and went still. His own face stared back at him from a picture marked with a year that hadn't happened yet. The walls groaned softly around them. They noticed symbols carved into the wood now. Small marks near doors, windows, even the bed frame. Tally marks. Some scratched out. Others untouched. Laura realized what they were. Attempts. The cabin wasn't a random place. It was a trap that reset itself.
People came.
Fear grew.
One stayed behind.
The other left. And the cabin waited again. Outside, the wind picked up, pushing against the walls. The forest creaked and shifted, branches rubbing together like fingers. Ethan backed away from the photos. "We're not part of this," he said, more to himself than to Laura. But Laura could feel it now, a quiet certainty settling in her chest. The cabin already disagreed, and whatever lived in the woods wasn't hunting them.
It was remembering them.
Night fell faster than it should have. One moment the sky was dim and gray. The next, darkness pressed against the cabin windows like a living thing. The fire flickered violently, throwing long shadows that bent and twisted along the walls. The air turned sharp and cold, even with the flames burning high. Laura noticed the first change when she tried to look outside. The trees were closer. Not by much. Just enough to feel wrong. Branches that had been several feet away now scraped softly against the glass. When she blinked and looked again, they hadn't moved. But the feeling remained, deep in her gut. The knocking returned. This time it wasn't random.
It moved.
Front door. Side wall. Back door. Slow, deliberate, like something circling the cabin, learning its shape. Learning them. Then a voice called out from the darkness. "Laura, open the door." She turned sharply toward Ethan, her heart pounding. "That was you," she whispered. Ethan shook his head, pale. "I didn't say anything." The voice came again. Closer now.
Perfect.
Every tone, every pause matched Ethan exactly. It even breathed the way he did. "Please," the voice said. "It's freezing out here." Ethan backed away from the door, panic written across his face. "That's not me," he said. "Whatever that is, it's copying us." The walls creaked loudly, as if responding to his words. The cabin felt smaller. The ceiling lower. Laura brushed her hand against the wall and flinched. The wood was warm, almost like skin. Through the window, she saw a shape standing between the trees.
Tall.
Still. Its face shifted subtly, features rearranging themselves until it looked almost human. Almost. The voice changed again. This time it was Laura's. She heard herself begging, crying, promising anything if the door would just open. Inside the cabin, Laura covered her mouth to keep from screaming. The woods weren't just surrounding them anymore. They were practicing. And whatever was out there had nearly learned enough to come inside on its own. The scratching began after midnight. Not outside. Inside. Laura woke to a sharp, dragging sound behind her. She turned slowly and saw fresh marks forming on the wooden wall, as if invisible claws were carving into it from the other side. Letters appeared one by one, deep and deliberate. "Only one leaves." The fire died down on its own. Cold flooded the cabin instantly. Ethan grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around Laura, but his hands were shaking too badly to steady her.
They understood now.
The rules weren't warnings. They were instructions. The cabin didn't kill people. It trapped them in a cycle, feeding on fear, copying voices, bending space. When terror reached its peak, it demanded balance. One stayed. One escaped. Laura remembered the photos. One face crossed out. One untouched. The tally marks. The attempts. "I won't let it take you," Ethan said, his voice breaking. But Laura felt something else beneath the fear. Recognition. The cabin felt familiar, like a place she'd known in a dream long before arriving. She realized why her voice had been so easy to copy. It had already belonged to the woods once. The scratching stopped. The message sank deeper into the wall, like it was being absorbed. A new sound replaced it. the engine of their car turning over outside.
Smooth.
Ready. The cabin was offering its bargain. Ethan moved toward the door, determined. Laura grabbed his hand. She saw the truth in his eyes. He would never leave her behind. That was the problem. The woods didn't choose randomly. They waited for someone willing to stay. Laura stepped back. If we both fight it, we both disappear, she said softly. This place needs a keeper. The door unlocked on its own. Ethan realized what she meant just as the forest fell silent. And for the first time since arriving, the cabin felt satisfied. Sunlight poured through the trees like nothing had ever been wrong. Birds chirped. The fog lifted. The woods looked ordinary again, almost welcoming. Ethan stood outside the cabin, keys in his hand, breathing hard as if he'd just woken from a nightmare he couldn't fully remember. The car started instantly. He turned toward the cabin one last time. Laura stood in the doorway, calm, wrapped in a sweater that hadn't been there before. Her expression was peaceful, not scared, not sad.
Go, she said gently.
Before it changes its mind. Ethan wanted to argue, but something deep inside him knew it was already over. The rules had been satisfied. The woods were done with him. He drove away. The road felt shorter now. Normal. Within minutes, the trees thinned and the forest released him. By the time he reached the main highway, the cabin felt like a distant dream. Something his mind refused to hold on to. Weeks passed. Ethan told people Laura was missing. Search teams looked. They found nothing.
No cabin.
No road. Officially, it never existed. Deep in the woods, the cabin stood quiet again. Laura moved through it like she belonged there. The walls no longer creaked when she touched them. The whispers were gone. In their place was silence that felt earned. She cleaned. She fixed the fire. She waited. When headlights finally appeared on the dirt road, she smiled. A new couple stepped out, laughing, phones in hand, excited by the isolation. Laura welcomed them warmly, offering to show them inside. She spoke kindly, reassuringly. As they unpacked, she paused at the door. Just one thing, she said casually. It's best to stay inside after dark. Animals get curious. The words felt natural now. As night began to fall, Laura closed the door behind them and listened as the woods woke up. The cycle had not ended. It had simply found its next caretaker.